So I came across an article from the CBC, and I guess it was supposed to be somehow promoting diversity, and it was supposed to be kind of like an uplifting story, and it was under the parenting section. I think released January 22nd, but it highlights the story between this or of this Haiti woman and her mother, and the challenges she faced raising her kid in Canadian society. And the title is "My Mother Didn't Raise Me Canadian, and Now I Know Why." And for me, this article just highlights the problems with diversity and trying to get people to integrate into the Canadian culture. And it's not any type of uplifting story like the comment section was all ranting about below. I'll read some of the comments afterwards, but this article just essentially highlights the problems with trying to mix a bunch of different cultures together, and how long essentially it takes people to integrate into becoming an actual Canadian. This is why I think the majority of people shouldn't be allowed to vote or run for public office unless you've been in Canada for, I don't know, 3 generations at the very least. I think 2, they still have too much connection to their old country. I think 3 is a good amount of time to wait. And I think it's a good compromise because, uh, the countries these people are coming from are not necessarily great places to live. So it's either, okay, you come here and you have a better life. Sure, you don't get to vote and all this shit for a little while, but that's going to work out for you in the end. And, wait a couple generations, then you can, right? But other than, and then, or you can go back to your country and live there instead. Then you can vote and do whatever you want, or go live in China, live under that dictatorship, or go back to Venezuela, wherever, But I think it's a good compromise to make. But this article, I'll read a couple parts of it just to highlight the examples of why this multiculturalism is just bound to fail in the end, and we're just going to create a fragmented society where people go into their own little communities and retain their culture. And then once these groups get bigger and more represented within society, they are going to have more power politically. They're going to vote for people that want to live in a country that supports their values, like the Ontario Party of, or the Islamic Party of Ontario. Once the demographics of Muslims gets higher, then eventually that party is going to be more and more viable, and people are going to vote for it. People are trying to brush this off like, it has no relevancy, just like the Christian Party. But, that's just because Western countries were more secular. We're not as theocratic, essentially, even if we are Christian, as Muslims. But Muslims, if they get a large proportion of the population, they're going to vote for a theocracy. We have plenty of examples of this in the world right now. There's not many free Muslim countries, or any at all, to name. So, but once again, I'll read a little bit of this article. But she's talking about her, coming to Canada, and how her culture is different, how they made her wear like a nice dress to go to school. And I'm like, I have no problem with that. That's actually good. That they have kind of like a modest culture, as opposed to what we have now, where Kim Kardashian is the fucking role model for kids to be, and Cardi B, fucking these whores essentially. But one thing that she mentioned in the article I thought was interesting. She's like, while my elementary school friends had the freedom to go to sleepovers and mall outings, there were 1,000 Haitian cultural reasons why I couldn't do the same. For instance, voodoo is widely practiced, and for the most part, not in a positive way. This has made many Haitians, my parents included, very cautious and overprotected of their kids. So there we go. There's one example of how it's going to take longer for these people to integrate, because they come from a culture where people practice voodoo, and they probably abduct your children there and like cut off their limbs and do who knows what with it in this voodoo type religion. So it's like already these people are coming in, and it's going to take them longer to integrate, because they just don't trust anybody. They're coming from a very low trust type society, right? Where you can't trust a lot of different people. So that's going to, get them to be more inclusive, or less inclusive, I mean more isolationist and less willing to integrate with us. But, so that is pretty fucked up, that they have voodoo in their cultures. People have to worry about their kids being abducted. There's not many. Most people in Western countries, you want to figure out who's the parents are before you let your kids go and have a sleepover. But most people aren't thinking about, are they going to be used in some voodoo type cult experiment? You don't have to worry about that in this country, in this culture. The more we import people, like massive amounts of refugees from these countries, and we're not like selecting people that are essentially trying to escape that, then we're going to get more of this type of behavior in Canada. We're going to start to see voodoo type, things being performed on kids. We're bringing more Muslims in here. We're going to start to see animals being slaughtered in the fucking streets eventually. Like that is going to happen. Why wouldn't it happen? If they get a majority to vote, why wouldn't they turn back some laws to allow them to perform their fucking religious duties or whatnot, or whatever they believe in their fucking religion? But so this is bad, right? They're not letting their kids go and sleep over, right? But I didn't really get why at the time. Any explanation sounds so outrageous. I couldn't relate because it felt so foreign to what was happening in my life in Canada. So it's like, yeah, there's none of this going on in Canada, right? And then fast forward to my adult years, I'm glad to have adjusted just fine all back then. Then she's talking about how to balance her Canadian or Haitian cultures. And that's the thing too, we got to understand that we can't ask people to completely renounce their cultures. It's unrealistic to assume people are going to do that and just become Canadian. That takes a long fucking time for people to feel Canadian. That's why I said we need to restrict the voting rights of people who just come here, because they're inevitably going to vote for policies that, I don't know, help their country, or if their country is antagonistic towards us, like China is, then you're going to see a lot more people less willing to call out China, because there's huge segments of the population of Chinese people that could get offended and may not vote for you in the future. So, having a more homogenous society is just better for everybody. You're going to see kids actually go out and play with each other, because there's not all these different cultures that practice different things and religions that you don't want to expose your kids to. Like, are you going to let your kid go and be babysat by a bunch of Muslims? Probably not, because they're going to try to indoctrinate your fucking kids to be Muslim. They're probably going to convert them. They'll say, I'm Muslim now. Then if they try to leave, they're going to be like threatened with death or something. So, this just does not promote society that is going to be functional in the future. This is why kids stay in and play video games to get fat and obese and unhealthy, because they're just, you don't see kids going out. Like even when I was younger, it wasn't as bad then, and we would all go out and play, ride our bikes every night till it was late at night. Now you don't ever see that, and as there's a direct correlation with the more diversity, or the more diverse our societies are becoming. There's one guy, I forget his name, Putman, or one researcher, he sat on information for like 5 years because he was more a leftist, and this information was essentially proving that the more diverse a society, community gets, the less unity, the less people go out and act like a community, know each other. This is going on in Toronto right now. If you look at the statistics and the rates of depression and how most people don't even know their neighbors and stuff, it's a very diverse place. But I'll read another example of how, in this article, another thing why diversity just is not really going to work in the long term. And it's just we're going to end up with a fractured, balkanized society. So then this part of the article, she's asking her mom different questions, and how hard it was for her and how easy, and but when you first came to Canada, did you have any plans or strategies in place as to how to raise your kids in this culture? And she's like, no, not at all. I didn't even have the intention to stay in Canada. Situations changed and opportunities presented themselves, and I then became a resident. So the thought of raising kids here was far from my mind. So you see, we have somebody in our culture now as a resident who had no intention to even stay here, anything like that, or become Canadian. It's just by happenstance, and they're probably like a refugee, and they just end up staying here because now their kid's a fucking Canadian resident, and she couldn't keep her legs closed, and our birth tourism gets exploited continuously, and then these people who don't even consider themselves Canadian, don't even really align themselves with the country, are now here, and they have a right to vote in the direction of where the country is going to go. Like, that's not a very good idea in my opinion. Now, Canadian government is letting expats vote who have lived outside of Canada for more than 5 years. That's all going to be Liberal voters, right? So you have no real plan in place. Then boom, you're married, and soon you have your first child. What were some of your first experiences or challenges when it came to cultural differences in raising? So first she just says food, that's an obvious difference, and it's I don't really care about that. But then the second thing was not having my family or a community that I'm used to around. In Haiti, everyone binds together to help raise a child. And I really wish people in our community started doing this more, and that they have this right in Haiti if they do this. When a woman gives birth, she has a whole team at her disposal, some cooking, some cleaning, some helping her bathe. Even as a child gets older in Haiti, I'd have access to free childcare and even counsel and advice. So, we gotta understand, people in these countries, she even says, we think Canada's, and she's like, but in Canada, I didn't have any of that. We think Canada's this huge socialist country. But yeah, we don't give as much as these countries even give to their people. She's even saying, she's like, in Haiti, I had all this community, plus access to free childcare and counsel for advice. In Canada, we have none of these things. And we think, and see, the community, and her community took over and did a lot of that stuff. We could be doing this too. We don't need the government to come in and help do everything for us. If the community took, we cared about everybody in the community, we interacted with everybody, we wouldn't need the government, we wouldn't need all this welfare, all these government programs to help us, because there would be no need for them. But we're so isolated from each other now that the argument for having a large state to provide for all these things becomes more and more justifiable. Right? Because the more they import different people, the less of a community we become. I came from a small little French town of a couple hundred people. And before I moved to Winnipeg, a bigger city, when my parents' stuff got divorced. But there was everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody. You see in these towns, why do they leave their doors unlocked all year fucking round? Why do they leave everything unlocked? Because they can trust each other. Because they know each other. They know everybody in the community. They can let their kids roam in the fucking town or the streets, and they can be sure that if they're doing something bad, everybody in that community kind of agrees what is bad, and they're going to be, punished for it, or they're going to tell their parents. But in another isolated community, everybody's different. They're all going to kind of pay attention. They're all going to mind their own business. They're not going to call out things that are going wrong or going bad. There's going to be no unity. And this woman explaining right here just is another example of that. So she's like, in Haiti, everyone gives birth, everybody helps, and they even have access to free childcare, even counsel. But in Canada, they didn't. Definitely eases things for the mom. But being here and not having much family around to begin with, I was left to do it all alone, as many other women here do. It can be done, but it's tougher, and that was rough for me. So, I'm sure it was rough. Yes, not having a community like we used to is very difficult. But she's just experiencing what all regular Canadians experience essentially nowadays. Our community is completely dissolved. And this has a direct correlation with the expansion of the government. The bigger our government gets, the less need we have to work with each other in a community. And working with each other in a community and taking care of each other is much more sustainable than the system we have now that we're all depending on. And what if this system collapses and crashes, right? We're going to expect these welfare checks to keep going? No, we're going to wish that we fostered relationships with people within our communities, because when everything crumbles, everything goes to shit, and there's like a massive recession, depression thing, the one thing that you're going to be able to rely on is other people that you know within your community to help you, to share. They got a little bit of food, you got a little bit of food, you can share with each other, you can all help each other last longer. And, the community, if there ever is a collapse, you will start to see a resurgence of the community, of people working together to get things done, because it's just not a reliable source to have the government do things for you, because we know the way that they spend. They just create debt and debt and debt, and they keep pushing it down. They keep kicking the can down the road, and all debt is just spending that your unborn children are gonna have to pay for one fucking day. That's all that's going on. We wonder why it's so hard for kids these days to live the same way that the older generation did. Well, a lot of the older generation bought into the whole socialism bullshit and into the government providing them with care and all this other crap. And this is the exact argument that they're using to replace us with immigration. It's like, well, there's going to be more old people than young people, and we need to pay for all these social programs that they want, like pensions and all this stuff. So we need to bring in different groups, different immigrants and stuff in order to keep paying to keep these old people alive, right? Whether they're going to do that or not is irrelevant. Doesn't matter. This is the justification they have to bring people in. So if there wasn't so much greed and laziness and dependence upon the state, then we wouldn't have these problems right now. But we do, because we wanted the government to take care of us, to do things for us. And we turned a blind eye to what was really going on. And there's also lots of propaganda. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people didn't know what they're voting for, in the 60s and 70s for like increased immigration stuff. A lot of people didn't think it was going to alter the culture and the fabric of their communities. But it is, and it will continue to do that unless it is stopped very, very soon. We don't have unlimited amounts of time. Once it reaches a certain point, we could stop immigration entirely, but that won't do anything. We'll still have the problem. People will still be outbreeding us, and we're still going to be replaced eventually. So, but this article itself is just another example. It's not uplifting like all these other people think it is. This just shows you the problems with diversity and how long it takes. How this woman, is saying like, oh, I'm glad I wasn't raised Canadian and raise her own culture and culturally. It's like, no, that's not a good thing for integration. If everybody followed what she did, Canada would be even worse. But luckily, there are some immigrants that actually want to be Canadian and actually try to become a Canadian and try to, forsake their old culture. I know lots of immigrants that if they ever came to America or to Canada, they're like, no, we're going to speak English. I'm going to send you to these schools. You're going to hang out with American kids. They try very hard to integrate. Those types of people you want. But clearly, the people they bring in through refugee programs and all the stuff that end up staying as well, they have even less drive to become a Canadian. And they're going to retain their culture for a very long time and not have full allegiance to Canada. You know what I mean? So, like, what do we expect? I've mentioned a couple of my other videos that there's something like 50 MPs and senators in Canada combined that have dual citizenship to other countries. Now, can we really expect these people to always have Canada's best interest at heart? No, we can't. If you think we can, then you're just an illogical person, right? But, I don't know. That's pretty much all I had to say about this. But actually, maybe I'll read a couple of comments because some of the comments are funny. So, great parenting, Jack Porter. Haitians are some of the nicest immigrants we receive in Canada. I'm sure they're very nice. I have met lots of nice ones, but what a wonderful story. The mother's comment about having to do it our own way is an excellent reminder of what many newcomers to Canada face and why it's often an advantage for them to begin their lives here in communities of people from their home countries. So this guy, he's Sharon Sterling, some dumb white woman, I'm assuming. Oh, this is so great that they go in their own little communities and don't integrate. Like, you're such a retard. And this is why women should not vote. I think generally most people shouldn't vote, but especially not women. Because they cannot think rationally. They can't think rationally. And all the other guys promoting this, the cucky guys, they're doing because they think it's going to get them laid and shit. They don't actually care or believe or whatever. But they're like, oh, so these feminist women, maybe they'll like what I'm saying and they'll suck my dick. I don't know. But looks like it took you a couple generations to get the whole cultural mosaic thing. Good to know you found your path to retain your culture while finding a way to integrate into the Canadian fabric of diversity. See, look at this multicultural radio. So even this guy, this is his fucking name. He's like, good thing you. Oh, I see. It only took you a couple generations. See, this guy's acknowledging it. A couple generations to get the whole cultural mosaic thing. And it's so great that you're retaining your culture while being Canadian at the same time. No, it's not a great thing. It's not a great thing to have a bunch of different cultures in one fucking place. Like, we're all gonna see the effects of this sooner or later. I struggle with myself, my wife, and I Canadians, but I don't agree with a good chunk of our heritage or appreciate a good portion of people who spout off about Canadians. They are, while they're racist, bigoted hypocrites. So this is another self-hating white Joe McLeod. He's probably, cucked by his wife. I struggle with this myself. My wife and I are Canadians, but I don't agree with a good chunk of our heritage or appreciate a good portion of people who spout off about Canadian they are, while they're racist, bigot hypocrites. So, our history to people like this is synonymous with racism. And just like, oh, you can't have pride in your Canadian heritage because residential schools. I think I'm going to teach all the positive about being Canadian as well as the negatives. Also, that blindly identifying yourself with a certain group, including countrymen, can have very negative consequences. Well, I agree with that to some extent. You shouldn't blindly. Best to identify you as a weave your own path. It says do your best to ensure your kids all the best aspects of your culture. One advantage you have is you can cherry pick the best aspects of two cultures. Good luck. It's like, fuck off. These stupid, cucky, stupid liberal idiots. Oh, it's so great that you're not integrating into the Canadian culture. This is going to be great for the future. We're going to have all this diversity and different opinions, how to do things. Like, no, it's not going to be great. Look at the way their country is run. Look at the way a lot of these people who are coming to the country, look at their countries and how things are run. It's shithole. They're shitholes. Look at AOC in America and stuff. Like, I guess her history is more socialistic. Now she wants to tax the rich 70%. And now all of these other Democrats are taking up this line and stuff. And, you look at Venezuela. Look at these countries. This is what we're going to get if we keep importing more of these people. And this woman, even in Haiti, she had all this socialism to help take care of her kid. Well, clearly that's not doing that well for that country either. And now there's aspects about it that I think is good, where she was saying, they all work together as a community. And we have lost that in Canada for a very long time. But, if you look at Haiti, it's a very homogenous culture. And that's going to be more likely, people are more likely going to act like that, to help take care of each other. Like I said, I grew up in a small town. And people did help each other, help my mom raise the kids. I could go hang out in town while my parents worked, and, the people around would watch you and stuff, right? So, having that community is a very important aspect. But, they're not losing that in their country because there's not a massive group of people going there to change the culture, to change the demographics. But that is happening in our countries. So, that needs to be stopped. We need to get increase the community in our societies so we can prevent the growth of this goddamn state that is continuing to grow. But I went on for a pretty long time there. Thank you for watching the whole video if you managed to stay to the very end. But if you like my content, subscribe, and have a good day. See ya.